Hello guys, welcome back to another video here on Mel's Life. Now I know I've been gone for a while. I do apologize about that. Things have been a little bit hectic lately, but here we are. I'm back and I actually had to do a little research for this video, which is why it may have taken a little longer for me to upload again. But before we get into the topic that I want to discuss today, if you like the content that you see here and would like to see more of it, remember to hit that subscribe button. And of course, if you like today's video in particular, remember to give it a big thumbs up. Remember, if you have any comments about the topics that we're discussing, you can comment them down below. I always like that we can have a discussion and hear different people's opinions. So with all of that said, let's get into today's video. Okay, so just before we get started on the topic that I want to discuss today, this is going to be part one of, I don't know how many parts there are going to be, but the eventual idea is to get to the issue of overthinking. But I thought we should cover a bit of background first before we get to that main idea that I really want to focus on. So this is part one. I don't know how many parts there are going to be, but let's just jump into what today is going to be about, which is about introversion, being an introvert, and obviously then discussing and looking at extroversion or being an extrovert a little bit as well. Okay, so introversion and extroversion are usually like boiled down to a couple of personality traits, right? Like, are you loud or are you quiet? Are you antisocial or are you a social butterfly? These are the things that people think about when you think introvert or extrovert. And to be perfectly honest with you guys, that was me a couple of like months or so ago. I was like, yeah, you know, extrovert, introvert, it's personality traits, things that you can learn or unlearn or even change, like learning to be more confident or learning to be more outspoken. That is actually what I thought. But like I mentioned at the beginning, I was starting to look into ways to fix my very bad habit of overthinking, and the topic of introversion and being an introvert kept popping up. So I thought, you know, I'm going to change course. We're going to look into introversion a bit first. Eventually we're going to get back to overthinking, but I think getting this background, like I mentioned, is really important. So introversion. Now, when you Google introvert or the definition of an introvert, it's your very obvious definition that pops up. Not necessarily the correct one, but the one you would expect. And I'm going to read this to you verbatim when I searched it on my computer. Introvert is a noun, a shy, reticent person. I am an introvert and I don't like public speaking. Now, this definition doesn't really satisfy me because I don't think that encompasses everything that is an introvert. So I did some more digging. I found a page called Introvert Dear, if I'm not mistaken, and they have actually a whole article about introverts. Well, they have a whole blog dedicated to introverts, but this specific one gives a brief definition of what an introvert is, followed by, of course, an article. So I'm going to just read their definition of an introvert. The definition of an introvert is someone who prefers calm, I promise I do know how to speak. Let's start from the top, shall we? The definition of an introvert is someone who prefers calm, minimally stimulating environments. Introverts tend to feel drained after socializing and regain their energy by spending time alone. This is largely because introverts' brains respond to dopamine differently than extroverts' brain. In other words, if you're an introvert, you were most likely born that way. Much better definition. Now, I'll put the link to the full article in the description if you do want to go check it out. Now, I think that is a much better definition of what an introvert is. It also points out that it's a lot more than just being shy, okay? So I did some more research, obviously, because I want to not just see the definition. I want to know, you know, what it actually means to be an introvert, all the little small things that makes an introvert. So I did some more research. There was a lot of articles, but I found one that kind of sums up most of the ideas, shall I say, into one article. Now it's a pretty long article, so I'm only going to cover about half of it in today's video, and we're going to cover the other half in the next part of the series. I did put that link in the description as well if you maybe want to read along or just go check it out afterwards. Now let's see, where does this article start off? Yes, it starts off at the very important part of showing us the difference between what an introvert is and what an extrovert is, and it's a lot more than being shy or outspoken. An introvert, they start by discussing introverts and extroverts in social gatherings or in social situations, which is where the biggest difference probably comes in. So what happens with introverts at a social gathering or within social in a social environment is they like social interaction, but to a degree. They don't like it as much. They want it in small packages because their energy actually gets drained from being in a social environment for too long, whereas extroverts start gaining energy the longer they are within that social environment. So they gain energy from people, whereas introverts in the same situation for too long will feel drained, and they, like the definition said, need to go and spend some more time alone just to recharge. Okay, so that is the first thing that this article points out. Now, the other thing that I also would just like to point out is that in this article and in that definition that we just read, it also shows us that being an introvert or an extrovert isn't just a couple of personality traits or quirks. It's actually the way our brain functions. Changing this is going to be like rewiring your own brain. It's not like just changing parts of your personality. It's physically how your brain functions, how your brain works. Even the neurotransmitters your brain releases, how much and how it reacts to it. So it's a lot more than a few personality traits, okay? What it also then points out, so the next point, they really paragraphed this quite well with the different points they're trying to make, is they show us the fact that introverts, sorry, I did not start this correctly. Let's take it from the top again. Okay, so the next point that this article makes is that an introvert isn't necessarily shy. Introversion doesn't always equal shyness. Now, I've known from a pretty young age that I do tend to be more introverted. Like you all know, introversion and extroversion, there's a spectrum. No one is, well, or very few people are just an introvert or just an extrovert, right? We all kind of have qualities of both. We just lean more to one side or the other. So I've known for quite a while that I lean more towards the introvert side of the spectrum, but I've never considered myself to be a shy person. I just like to take time to consider my thoughts, to consider the information that's being presented in a conversation, so that I can add value with my response. I don't want to just respond to respond if my response isn't going to add value to the conversation. Now, sometimes, especially when you're in a group of extroverts, by the time you have formed your thoughts while considering all information, they have moved on to the next topic, and you just feel like, okay, I'm just not going to say anything because we're now discussing new information. There's new information I need to focus on, which then kind of, I think, reads like quietness or shyness. But that's not what an introvert is. Because I've never been shy. I've just liked to add value to a conversation instead of just talking for the sake of talking. Now, what this article found is that scientists found that with introverts, like I just mentioned, there's not necessarily an intellectual advantage, but introverts' brains actually filter through or process. They process more information at a given time than an extrovert's brain. that doesn't necessarily mean they're intellectually superior. It's just that their brain at any given time will be processing more information than an extrovert. But they actually explain this quite well with a quote here. Extroverts are comfortable thinking as they speak. Introverts prefer slow-paced interactions that allow room for thought. So it's not the one is more intellectual than the other. It's a different way of thinking. Extroverts, they talk, they speak, and they think while they speak, and sometimes then the pen will drop and they'll continue speaking because they just figured something out. Whereas an introvert will take the information, process the information, and then, express an opinion or a response. So it's not about intellect, it's about just different ways that we as people, extroverts or introverts, process the information that we're given, which is why extroverts are sometimes thought of people who talk more, but because that's the way they think, by talking, whereas introverts are seen as the quiet type because they like to sit, take in the information, process it, formulate a response, and then respond. Okay, now when it came to looking more into the social interactions of extroverts and introverts, the one thing they did find they had in common is when it came to loved ones, whether that's family, a romantic partner, or very, very close friends, introverts and extroverts would most likely spend the same amount of time with these people. Extroverts probably because they just like to be around people. Introverts because they prefer that deeper bond, especially with family, people who know them, who know their quirks, who know who they are, and will kind of have an engaging conversation with them. An introvert, however, will still need that little alone time to recharge after said family gathering. Now, there's a piece in this article. I'm going to quote this again because it's a study that they found. It was actually really fascinating when I read this for the first time. So I'm going to quote it directly. Researchers have found that introverts who act extroverted show slower reaction times on subsequent cognitive tests than those allowed to act introverted. Their cognitive fatigue testifies to the fact that acting counter-dispositionally is depleting. So this was really fascinating when I read it for the first time. Now I'm going to explain it because they explain it quite well, but I'm just going to explain. So basically what it says is when an introvert was put in a situation or forced to act extroverted, outspoken, talking the whole time, not taking time to consider, which I don't even know how you would just turn it on and off like that. I haven't figured that out. Their cognitive function actually declined when given a cognitive test. It was actually worse off than those who were just allowed to be introverted. Their cognitive function was basically still the same, and acting opposite of what you are is depleting. And the thing about this is it's true, and this is maybe anecdotal because I'm going to speak from my own experience, but at my job, when I get home after work, yes, it's a 9 to 10 hour shift sometimes, but when I got home, I would be absolutely exhausted. I mean, done. Like, I could get into bed, not care, and just sleep. But it's not because my work is very physically or intellectually challenging. It's not. It's very basic, not very physically challenging, not very intellectually challenging. But the reason I felt so exhausted, I figured out when I read that, is that my work requires me to be a lot more extroverted than I am. Making small talk with coworkers to create a better work environment, or, even when there's telephonic queries or in-person queries where you have to deal with people, hi, how are you, as if someone actually cares, who's just phoning you for information. You have to have that whole conversation, which I get, it's etiquette, you want to be friendly, but it goes beyond just being friendly. It goes to be more extroverted because it makes the environment more comfortable for everyone when you can engage in small talk because it feels like you're a part of the team. And having to act that extroverted as an introvert is what was kind of draining me. Now, sure, I'm sure the work that I do also adds to my exhaustion, but I think that was a really big component of why I always felt so tired. Well, still feel very, very tired when I get home after work. And that just kind of put a couple of things in place for me. So it also proves that, you know, introversion and extroversion isn't something we're just gonna change. I guess if you really want to, you can retrain your brain. I don't even know if that's possible. I don't know the science about that because it's really your brain function, your brain chemistry. It's not just your personality. You can learn to be confident as an introvert. You can learn to be outspoken in the sense that you will say something, you will stand up for yourself. Introversion doesn't always mean I'm just going to sit down and take whatever everyone's. It's actually, I will have enough information to make, you know, a educated response. But obviously you're going to learn to be more assertive or more confident. That is a personality thing. But introversion and extroversion is fundamentally a part of who we are. It's part of your brain. It's not just something you can change. And a last thing that I want to touch on before we end this video is our society in large. Now, their focus is obviously on America because it's a really large country. But it was quite fascinating. What they found is that the amounts of introverts and extroverts line up quite equally in the American population, but the society is a lot more catered towards extroversion, you know, because it's flashy images, sound bites, quick, you know, videos. Just think TikTok. It's that loud, flashing images, bright images, loud sounds, quick sounds, catchy catchphrases, you know, sound bites. It's a lot more catered towards extroversion, even in my own personal experience, where making small talk with coworkers is considered, you know, creating a nice work environment. The society, even though it's split equally, is a lot more catered towards extroversion. And if you just consider what we read earlier about how acting counter dispositionally, is that what they use? They used big words. Yes. It depletes your energy. But not just that. Just think about the effect it has on your mental health. Now, obviously, you're not ever going to be able to just completely change an extroverted society into an introverted society, or vice versa, because I think if you would change it into an introverted society, obviously the extroverts would suffer, and we don't want that. But it just makes sense to, if acting more extroverted is energetically depleting, it's obviously going to have an effect on your mental health. And it kind of just makes sense for a lot of the things that I've been experiencing since I started my job. And this is also where it kind of links to the overthinking thing. But there's obviously a lot more ground to cover before we get to overthinking. And we still have half the article to cover as well. They go more into the extroversion of society, all the overstimulation, but that is what we're going to be covering in the next video when we cover the rest of this article, and then eventually move into talking more about overthinking, its effects, and how we can better deal with it. So guys, this is part one. I really hope you enjoyed it. I kind of enjoyed talking about this. It's very fascinating. I love doing the research for this as well. I thought, like, I learned so much, not just about myself as an introvert, but also about extroverts, things that I never really considered, which were like, I learned a lot. It was really, really fascinating, and I want to continue learning, and I want to continue covering this article, but that is for another video. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this one with me. Remember, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys for part 2.